Hey, what is up, mortals? What if Deku was in Class 1B Season 2 Part 3? Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, so we begin. Revolting. That was the only word capable of describing the stench that stuck like a slug's mucus, the blood that pooled before the two children could be tasted through their agitated scent glands. The sight left a lingering hint of coppery metal. Death tainted the very air. Izuku and Takage felt sick to the core as they could feel their knees buckle. Nothing in their training could have prepared for the foul and a burning sensation that crawled up their skin. Ida's lifeless eyes had shattered their confidence, but despite his very organs twisting and wanting to hurl, a figure hidden in the back kept the boy grounded. It was native, injured but alive, and the intention to save glowed in Izuku's bright green pupils. He was scared, that's for sure, but the Greenette's resolve had always been unbreakable. Lizardy, hearing her hero name, Takage snapped out of it and her large eyes slanted. It was true that her nerves were on fire, but somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew she had to be strong. This is no time to be frightened, she told herself with determination. The dusky green orbs shone with intention, a similar way to Izuku's that didn't go unnoticed. Do you have a plan? Plan or not? We have to save him, all of us, out safely, coming to a quick mutual agreement. Adrenaline ran through their veins. One for all shot out pale green lighting from Izuku's body as Takage's body split into multiple parts. They faced away from Ida. Now was not the time to get caught up in fear as their hearts hammered heavily against their chests. Both pairs of emerald orbs faced their target who just ignored the body. Instead, Stain's lips widened into a malicious grin. If we clash, the weaker will be culled. With words dripping in malice, chills up the children's spines. But they didn't move. They were calm and calculating. They knew what needed to be done. Takage sent her smallest parts to find backup and tapped the other's shoulder. They both pulled out their best smile and solidified their resolve. It was time to fight. We fight to protect. That is the essence of being a hero. The hero killer smiled back as green lightning sparked forward. Good. A katana lifted up high up toward the mood before making an accurate swing to Izuku's head. The greenette ran into close range. Knives left their sheaths as Stain sliced upwards. However, the calculating boy slid between the killer's legs and flipped his body so that he jumped above. The vigilante was taken off guard as a determined voice rang out. 5% Detroit, aiming a direct blow. The fist flew toward the back of its target's head as hard as it could. Smash, leaping backwards. It was Takage's turn as she immediately sent forward a barrage of scales. A whirling storm surrounded the vigilante who started to speak. It's not that you saw through my movements. You left my field of vision. The words were aimed at Izuku as he watched the killer lick his knife. You maneuvered so that you would definitely be able to bring me down. That's what your movements were like. The greenette felt his body stiffen suddenly. Takage noticed and immediately grabbed his frozen body. Deku, her attention briefly shifted as she dragged them both backward. Stain took advantage of the situation and escaped the vortex of scales. First instinct to save the one most in danger. Both of you. The dusky eyes widened slightly as the vigilante spoke about her. Her body froze from the feeling of vulnerability that crept up Takage's spine. Having her actions explained had cut in places the student didn't understand, but she kept her face calm. 1. Because she knew worrying wasn't going to get her anywhere. And 2. Was that her scales received good news. Gran Torino, she thought, and immediately focused on getting the old hero to where they were as soon as possible. People who are all talk are a dime a dozen, but you two are worth letting live. You're both different from that one. As Stain faced the dead one, a student, Izuku noticed a red tint that reflected against the haunting moonlight. Blood. His eyes shifted briefly to Takage as he asked, Lizardy, am I bleeding? The slanted pupils ran across his frozen body before noticing a small cut to his thigh. So insignificant. It could be called a paper cut that barely drew blood. Just a little. Is it his quirk? Eyebrows furrowed as the emerald eyes turned toward the vigilante. He licked my blood. Then I froze, as they tried to figure out the killer's quirk. A knife was held up with its trajectory aimed at native Lizardy. Takage reacted immediately to the cry as she sent her body to Stain. Azure Scales dodged the knife as they refused to let the vigilante hurt the injured pro-hero more. Her efforts were futile, however, as the killer got closer. With a second to make a decision, the young hero in training made the one avoiding death. 3 o'clock. Her yell was for Gran Torino. The hero was about to speed past the alleyway when he rushed in at blinding speeds. With a clatter, the knife fell to the floor and the yellow boots kicked the blade away. Native was saved, but now they no longer had the opportunity for a surprise attack. One after another, Stain muttered, unable to identify who the new person was as the old hero noticed the corpse. God, these kids. There was no time to worry about the students' mentalities as Izuku yelled out, Don't get cut. His quirk will immobilize you if he drinks your blood. He's after Native. Gran Torino just smiled as he bounced on the soles of his feet. A target, huh? That's rather troublesome, eh? Well, in that case, both greenettes could barely keep up as the flash of yellow bounced toward the injured pro. But luck was not on their side as Stain's sharp sight caught the rescue attempt last second. A knife slashed through the air toward Native and rotating in the air. Gran Torino kicked the weapon away. Just as he did, the vigilante sent another, once again aimed at Native. We need to get Native out of there. Izuku grunted through the immobilization. He was unable to do anything as Takage tried to help. Sending sapphire scales forward as a distraction only backfired as the hero killer noticed and threw a dagger in their direction. Emerald eyes traced the incoming blade and under the restriction, Izuku felt his arms move, with no time to wonder why. One for all crackled out and the greenette ran forward. The blade fell to the floor, but now blood seeped through the torn green suit and onto the cold concrete floor. I'm fine, Izuku yelled, not wanting to cause more worry as he ignored the pain. You can move, Takage asked, and the other looked at his own body. His mind rapidly analyzed the situation. I can think of 3 possible reasons. It could be less effective with more people. The amount digested could affect how long it works. It was true since Native was still caught. Blood oozed through his tribal clothes from his shoulder. Or there could be a difference based on blood type. The vigilante turned to look at the student. His exceptional hearing had picked up their conversation, and despite the knife fight against Gran Torino, he grinned as his target said, I'm blood type B. Blood type. At the speed of a bullet, the old hero ran forward. The hero killer was speaking to Izuku. It took less than a second, but during the brief moment of distraction, Gran Torino saved Native. That's correct. I'm blood type O. It must have a shorter time limit than B, the freckled boy said, but Gran Torino was now smiling. He placed Native next to the kids, now that there's no one in the way, before they could even blink. The alleyway floor shattered to pieces and there was rubble in the air. The 3 on standby sat shocked. Gran Torino had cranked his quirk into top speeds and pencil dived the vigilante. The impact was so severe that as the old hero stood with a food on Stain's back, they stood surrounded in broken slabs of concrete. I cracked the path. It's been a while. My control must be off. Stain was unconscious with his mask slipping off his face slightly. Completely out cold. I'll get his weapons off him for now. One of you, call someone to restrain him. 2 pairs of green eyes shined in awe at the level of power displayed. Their adrenaline was finally started to slow down. Takage had the idea to look in the bins, as almost anything could be found inside trash collection sites, and she was right. They found some rope and Gran Torino called for more heroes to collect the killer. The event was over as a small-time hero arrived before leaving to call a cleanup team. Gran Torino stayed put as he held the rope that captured Stain, and the 2 students finally exhaled. What now? The glaring problem that both students ignored was becoming more and more noticeable. They had drowned it out during the heat of that battle, but they could no longer just ignore it. Ada's dead body. The sick feeling Izuku had suppressed came back in heavy waves. All he could feel was the heavy pit welling up from the depths of his stomach. Takage wasn't doing any better as she was still in denial. To the 2 of them, Ada was no more than a blue-haired boy who they crossed briefly during the cavalry battle. Just a person who came for their headband and lost. And yet, that same person was now dead in front of them. If only my range was larger in the first place, I would have noticed the fight before he got killed. The sapphire-scaled hands trembled as Takage blamed herself internally. She wobbled up after tying up the unconscious vigilante. If I was stronger, then. Izuku noticed the shaking hands, and although he felt like throwing up, he brought his numb self over to hers. The clouded mind couldn't think of anything to say as the lips that forced a smile moments ago now tremble. However, scarred hands lifted slowly to gently rest upon the hunched back. It was a gesture Takage did for him all the time that gave him confidence. Izuku could only hope his gesture could give her comfort, feeling her shudder slightly under the contact. The calloused hands kindly rubbed up and down as large clear tears welled up from the dusky forest eyes. Gran Torino saw this and noticed his mistake, seeing that it was cruel to assume the kids wouldn't react to the dead body, and quickly grabbed one of Stain's knives to cut off his yellow cape. Covering Ada, he walked over to Izuku. The child was putting on a brave face. The old hero placed a hand onto his student's messy green curls and felt a jolt of surprise. The tense green eyes turned to look up at Gran Torino, who just smiled. He was a man who had seen pain and knew the importance of reassurance. Feeling safe, a sniffle escaped Izuku's throat. It caught Takage's attention and she immediately hugged him. Hugging back, the 2 greenettes clung to each other as a moment of silence held, then broke. They cried their hearts out. They were scared, anxious, and had seen death, but they pulled through and made it out alive. It felt like forever as the 2 students remained sitting in the alleyway. Native was able to move again, and he helped the cleanup team remove the body. Endeavor had been pursuing a flying Namu who caught an unconscious civilian the next street over and was walking down the empty road toward Gran Torino. The number 2 had been given the call for help, since Gran Torino wished to have his name hidden. The flame hero was going to take the credit, and Izuku lifted his tired head. He was exhausted, both physically and mentally. Both he and Takage were covered in his blood, and Izuku couldn't even feel the gash in his leg. He just didn't want to think for a while. All he knew now was that they were cold, and he could feel Takage shivering too. Let's go. He got up. His body felt sluggish, and the greenette didn't know whether it was blood loss or just fatigue. The lizard girl lifted her head to look up. The slightly puffy red eyes and quiet demeanor wasn't something the boy was used to seeing, but he pulled on a weary smile. Come on, it's cold. With a slow nod, she got up. Their blue and green suits shined a dull red as they headed to the ambulance, sitting in the warmth. The boy just sighed. We should rest. The night isn't over. Izuku was right. Over the next few hours, an emergency meeting was held for the pro heroes, and reporters crowded in for the private interview. The 2 greenettes had to be present because they had helped the police with rescuing and evacuating citizens. The 2 heroes who took them in were given a punishment. Nothing too major. They had their teaching licenses taken for a month. It wasn't severe because they had given the students permission, and it was done to mostly shut up the press, since Manuel was the one held accountable for Ada. His teaching license was taken entirely away, although some reporters yelled that the punishment didn't do justice for a promising student's death. They were quietened as a recording was played. It showed Tensei Ada in a hospital bed but conscious as the crippled hero spoke. I have failed as both a brother and a hero. There was silence as a mother's crying could be heard in the video. I do not blame Manuel for Tenya's passing. Tears could be seen dampening the pillow as Tensei's voice shook. When I heard Tenya decided to not intern with the family and go to Hasu instead, I knew at the back of my mind he left for revenge. After Stain almost took my life, Tenya changed. If anyone was to be blamed for my brother's death, it would be me, because I wasn't strong enough, even if Tensei had forgiven Manuel. The normal hero hadn't forgiven himself. He had known why the youngest Ida interned with him, yet all he did was give a warning. The water controller kept wondering if all this could have been prevented, if I just kept watch properly. I even spoke to him the mere moment he ran off. Now the hero could only stand there with his head bowed down, unable to face anyone. Internships were postponed as Yue and the Ida family prepared for the funeral. During the next 3 days, Izuku and Takage stayed in the hospital as both a precaution and for the injured boy's leg. It never made it onto the big screen as Vlad yelled at the interviewer. But the 2 had been blinded with flashing camera lights and questions too. Their section on screen was cut out, however. Seeing how insensitive the questions were, and the homeroom teacher was greatly concerned for his students, even if physical injuries were going to be fine. Their mental scars were not going to be healed easily. If only I got there faster. Maybe then I would have been able to save him, more than the death. The itching idea that he could have saved the engine boy annoyed Izuku to no end. He had vowed to be a hero, yet here was an example where he had failed. The failure was what hovered over his mind, so that his usually bright emeralds were almost dull and lifeless. But there's no point complaining. The funeral was the next day, and the boy looked at his scarred leg. The jade orbs then settled on the figure who sat across the room on her bed, Takage, although the matter weighed heavily on the boy's mind. When their eyes met, all thoughts were pushed into the back burner. He couldn't save Ida, but that didn't mean he could save others. He was done getting worked up over something he can't change. Getting up, Izuku went to sit next to the silent one. His scarred hand landed on the girl's back, and the dusky moss-colored eyes blinked before turning to meet worried Deku. Izuku couldn't smile. Not yet, at least. Right now he just wanted to be honest. Honest with the pain, and honest with his thoughts. A feeling of déjà vu flickered across his mind, and he finally spoke. As heroes, we learn from the pain. Trailing off a little, Takage recognized the words. Izuku was repeating a line from their first conversation. It was the moment when she helped Izuku up from after Bakugo knocked down his non-existent confidence. The day where they had not only first met, but the day everything in their lives had started to change and move. She had helped him, and now he wanted to help her. Right. Teeth made themselves known as a smile finally graced the deputy rep's face. The other relaxed, loving the grin that would fill him with the feeling of warmth. The slump in the dinosaur lover's back straightened out as energy started to recirculate around her system, with her usual self resurrecting. The 2 students smiled at each other. Takage lifted her arm and clenched a fist, repeating the words she said back then. We have to make do with what we have, even though nothing had physically changed. The 2 felt stronger as their minds woke up from their haze. Ida's death was undeniably going to haunt them both for a long time. But neither student would let his death hold them back. They were going to use this as an opportunity to get stronger, a reminder to never let anyone die on their watch ever again. During the interview days, the news on Stain went viral. The hero killer was taken to Tartarus prison after it was announced Endeavor took him down. Gran Torino met up with All Might. The retired hero was talking about how the hero killer and the League of Villains were connected, even if the media made it seem that the League helped improve Stain's image. With the vigilante in prison, the League was next in line for the spotlight. The one behind the scenes would have to be pretty good. You know what that means, don't you, Tashinori? The number one hero clenched a fist as he had to accept that reality was not what he had believed. His arch-nemesis had definitely survived the fatal injury and was active again. That child admires you so bravely. I know he's recovering, but you must find time to tell him properly everything about One for All. And All for One. The ride was in silence as they joined the procession behind the hearse carrying the youngest of the Ida family, even though there were so many. The streets were silent from human sound. Everyone was there. The students, UA staff, and the pro heroes who took in interns all stood in attendance. Just as the coffin was laid on the planks above the grave, the funeral began. The mourners gathered around the sapphire and white flowers, even though they were beautiful. They made the atmosphere more melancholy with their somber tones. Monoma gave the two a nod of greeting as he stood silently next to them. They had no words to exchange as they listened to the words spoken out before watching the coffin gently lowered. It only took a few minutes, but when they were ready, Tenya's father stepped forward. He spoke proudly of his son, which caused their mother to burst into tears. She had stayed behind to stay with Tensei, and the two joined through a video call. After the family all said their words of love and memories, Mr. Aizawa was next. He thanked his student for keeping the class in order when Momo or Kendo was out. The two girls bowed when they heard their homeroom teacher and held back their tears. Uraraka and Asui spoke as they were his best friends, and the two teary-eyed girls barely held it together. When asked if anyone had any more to say, Wana didn't expect Izuku and Takage to raise their hands. The two walked forward and stood in front of the crowd as Izuku cleared his throat. Before I even start, we would like to say sorry. Takage also took a deep breath as the two had prepared what to say. If I was just stronger, or if I were faster, then just maybe we could have changed the outcome. There was silence as the two took a deep apologetic bow toward the Ida family. We might not have known him as well as many of you, but he was still a part of our lives. Takage nodded, her dark green locks falling over her face as she continued on, even if they had haunted her at first. The memories of Ida had become her resolve to improve, so we would also like to thank him. We wanted to thank him because every encounter that we make on our paths are important. They shape us to who we are. They then took another bow. This time is thanks to the family. Thank you, divided by thank you. Tenya's family all bowed back. A sign of respect followed with sad smiles as the funeral reception came to an end. Many started to leave and go home, leaving the Ida family and those closest alone to cry as the grave got buried, since Tensei had made it clear that no one other than the killer and himself was to blame for his younger brother's death. The internships continued after students got warned not to wander about carelessly. Takage also returned, declaring she had to be stronger as she left. Gran Torino smiled as he saw the girl wave Izuku off with a smile before entering the hospital room where the successor was. There was now a small scar left on the freckled boy's leg, but the greenette didn't mind. It was the physical proof of his resolve, and he wanted to use those legs to stand tall. With a smile, he turned to his mentor and clenched a fist. I want to get stronger, faster, so that I can save everyone. The retired hero let out an amused chuckle as he turned around. The intern quickly followed after him. Guess that means I'll up the training. The emerald eyes shined brightly as Izuku bounced on his feet, nodding as he walked, and Gran Torino smiled internally. He still has a lot to learn, facing his wrinkled face to the clouded sky above. The retired hero walked after the child who had bounced on ahead. He was glad to see that Izuku could use his experience to grow stronger both mind and body. He really is just like you, huh? Tashinori. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer for this video, as well as the editor for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. Thank you all for watching. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals. Have a fantastic day.